Tales from the shit. Me. You. Oh, hey, tripod. You here for the story? It's gonna be a good one. Oh, yeah. It's got a racist dude in it. But I made him Asian to be inclusive. It's a creepy one. This is a little something I call coping mechanisms. I'm sorry I had to hit you like that, but listen closely. Your friend is dead. Fool stepped on a landmine, not that there was a way to avoid it. I keep them in the cabbages because I hate both cabbages and the people that would steal them. Your situation is this. You have a sack on your head, a gag in your mouth, and I've bound your arms and legs together. Now, I'm going to lift you up and I'm going to ask you to remain calm as I carry you across to the house. Be assured, if you make a sound, they will hear you. If you try to escape, they will hear you. You must be still, and in 30 seconds we will be safely beside my home. So, hang on to my shoulder tight. We have to go down a long flight of stairs to get to the basement. The ceiling is low, so whatever you do, don't lean up or try to escape. You'll either hit your head on the ceiling or you'll knock us both down the stairs, and like I said, it's a very long fall. All right, up you go. If you do as I ask, we'll get inside safely. Ready? Good girl. Let's go. What a creeper. I would just like the permanent record to reflect, I don't like this guy. See, that wasn't so bad, was it? I think they are distracted by your friend's misfortune. In a way, he saved our lives, if that makes the loss any easier. Sometimes it can help to apply purpose to the randomness of life. Now, I'm going to put you down on this chair. Just so you're aware, it has rollers, wheels, so it slides around. The floor is smooth concrete, so please, try to be careful. I'm going to tie you to the chair because experience has taught me that it always pays to be cautious. It is important that you remain still, perfectly still, still as a deer. If you were to tip over, you could certainly crack your skull open on the floor. Let's talk for a while now to try and take the edge off. Until things start to calm down outside, I'll have to speak softly. I'd hate for them to hear us. I've been safe here for so long, but the two of you really managed to stir them up. Of course, they should be busy going to the explosion to consume what's left of your friend. Don't worry, honey. He didn't feel a thing. I've always used the big boys in the bluff garden, not the toe poppers. I keep those scattered about the woods. I know this must all be very unsettling for you. I know it's a lot to take in. I also apologize that you don't get to see my face, but I'm not sure that would make it any easier for either of us. Now, don't worry. I won't be keeping you for a sex slave or anything like that, and it's not because you aren't very pretty. It's just that when you keep company, you always get stuck making conversation, and conversation is the part I hate most about being around people. The concept of having to pretend to care through sound. It's ridiculous. Just know that when I get around to doing it, I promise it will be quick. I'm sorry that you'll have to wait for me to prepare dinner. It's just that when I don't eat, I get weak, and when the time finally comes, I'd hate to make a mess of things. It's inhumane. But on to brighter topics. For now, for a short while at least, you are my guest. What shall we talk about, Well, how about me? Seems the obvious choice given your predicament. You know, there was a time when I would have been called an American patriot, or, if you're PC, make that a -American. Personally, I'd always put the emphasis on American. It's the only part worth capitalizing. Anyway, after all that particular foolishness, now I'm just alone. This November I'll be 56 years old, but I'm yet to really feel it like I probably should. I've managed to stay in good shape out here. It's required. I do it all for my yard, you see, and that's why it remains the finest on the block. People have described it as clean and well manicured. It is the object of my adoration and, when it's in season, the emerald jewel of the realm. Excuse me, my realm. My realm. I was married once, can you believe it? I used to be a good-looking guy, too. I wasn't always this hairy or bald or wrinkled. Of course, time will always have its way with you, regardless of how one feels about it. But my wife and I, ex-wife I mean, we were both geeks. We met in one of the labs at the university, and soon after we became inseparable. I loved her for as long as I could, but the cheating is what ruined us. She kept telling me I was paranoid, but I guess at this point, that doesn't matter. In the end, she got it all, other than my high mileage out back and a few $1,000s. After the proceedings, I took that money and sunk it into all this, all that you now see. At the time, this house was a foreclosure on the edge of a small town, which meant, of course, that it was nothing special. It was run down, nearly ruined, so I bought it for next to nothing. After all this, though, it's a castle. My castle. I guess you could say that, in a way, my divorce was my first apocalypse. It changed my world in a way I didn't know possible. It kept me from being prepared for the next. Somehow, I managed to sleep through it all with eyes wide open. The news reports, the definite palpable stress that weighed heavily in the air, it was all there. Strange as it sounds, I can remember all of it. I just ignored everything. Other things seem more pressing. You know how it is. Well, you're young, so I guess you don't. Back then, my concerns were mainly the bills, which meant giving money to people you've never met to keep the lights on. Then, in close second, came Ralph's constant idiocy. Finally, there was the yard, which at the time I took for granted. As the world grew worse, the yard began to take precedent. My dedication to my yard stems from my dedication to order. I've always preferred things nice and tidy. I find it easier to enjoy them that way. My wife had always told me it's good to enjoy things, but until I found this yard, I never had the knack for it. Enjoyment, that is. So this yard, this life, are all mine. For the covetous, as your friend discovered earlier, its traps are many, its devices clever. The soil here is dark, so dark, and I work hard to keep it lush, watered, and well patrolled. I'm careful to rotate my crops from year to year, and spring to summer I keep everything well mowed. I happened upon a reel mower in Ralph's shed. It's quiet enough and does a good job. That's how I take care of my patch, and it takes care of me. It's how things have been for years now, but it wasn't always this way. In the old world, I worked as a sound engineer, and I loved my job. There were times when I maybe even enjoyed it. I dealt with simple components simply ordered. I designed headphones. Oh, sorry. You're young. So what was trash at the time would seem magical to you. Headphones were a listening device placed over the ears. I created some of the very best. You could put them on your little head and they'd have the power to transport mind from body. But they only worked if the rules were followed. Order, you see. There's power to it, as there's always been. Point is, my profession is the reason that I like my rows straight, my neighbors straighter. I'm kidding. The gays never bothered me much. At least they kept their houses clean, not like the others, especially the border hoppers. I never understood why a group of people that so often worked as maids couldn't keep their own homes from descending into filth. It's disgusting. Well, I know what it is. Primarily, I think it's a lack of pride. They're lazy once you stop paying them, and they're dumb enough to work for anything, but they've always been a short-term people. They don't have the cultural pride, the long-term vision. That's what drives us true Americans. We've always seen the big picture. That's why they were all deported by the president, and rightfully so. They weren't keeping with our values. They'd never be real Americans. So now, even though when it's hot I wish I had some border hoppers around, I no longer have to worry about them or anyone else. I only wish they would have had time to finish the wall. What a waste. I even signed a petition that was floating around that would have allowed armed civilians to patrol it. Imagine that. Being down there on that fresh new wall, doing your civic duty and shooting up some cans. Cans, get it? That was one of Ralph's favorite lines. Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, and, if he'd managed to get really lucky, Africans. He was right, though. They're all lazy, all basically useless. Subhuman seems a tad strong, but I admit it's close. The beaners and the blacks, they were the monsters before the monsters. Them and the Arabs. They had no order. No order at all. Ah, damn it. I guess I dropped my lighter outside. But you're not going anywhere, are you, sweetheart? Didn't think so. I'll be back in a moment. Hopefully nothing grabs me. I'd hate for you to starve down here all alone in the basement. That would be a slow way to go. Nothing humane about that at all. Sorry that took so long. They're still out there, still restless. I think I was careful enough, though, which I'm sure you're pleased to hear. They're moving in the tree line over by where you were hiding. The wind is picking up, so I had to secure a few things so they'd still be where I put them. Unless, of course, some other little peckerhead comes and tries to steal them. Sorry for all the coughing, but these are harsh. The smokes Ralph had stockpiled are so dried out they go up like matches. It's funny because I never smoked for the entirety of my life, but then I went and got addicted to the damn things. Ah, shit. Burnt my hand on the hot plate. Seems he got me distracted. Gah. Now, where were we? Oh, yes. When the shit hit the fan, a phrase I've since become fond of, I wasn't as prepared as I should have been. Luckily for me, I had Ralph, my next-door neighbor. When I first met Ralph, I thought he was an annoying old redneck, and honestly, I was right. He was gruff, fat, dirty, and his clothes were always covered with engine grease and gun oil. His trash can home was falling apart, very disorderly. It looked like something a squatter would live in, or like a city rat's crack house. It was cluttered, junky. Ralph always reeked of beer, and on the weekends, that cheap scotch he carried around in a plastic jug. I was always careful around him on the nights he was stumbling around with that liter of McGregor. The whiskey made him mean, super aggressive. Ralph was always over there, and he was always loud, no exceptions. He'd be outside at all hours, revving up an engine in the shed behind his house or playing with his shotguns back in the woods. He was constantly drunk, always abrasive, and everything I hated. But what could I do? I'd already bought the house, put cash down. Back then, that meant something. I had invested everything. I was bound here. For me, there was no escape. And so, because of this, I dug in. I fortified my position, though not yet in the literal sense. At that point, it was all mental. I think, over time, Ralph came to respect that. But, as I've said, those days are gone now. That town is gone. That life is gone. But the house, this house, it remains. Why? Dedication. I fixed it up. I put my soul, my frustration into this house. I made it mine. And in that way I am anchored to it. I am still here and shall remain, still attached, it being both my lifeline and my sanctuary, my obsession and my release. Ah, looks like my food's ready. That's the good thing about canned goods. Add a little heat, a pinch or two of salt and pepper, and you've got a meal. Even smells good. I would offer you some, I really would, but it would just be a waste. Waste not, want not, and all that. I'm pretty sure that's in the good book someplace, possibly, but I can't really remember. At this point, it all blends together. But I'm sure you're wondering how I've survived out here this long, and that's easy. Step 1 is to stay quiet. Other than that, it's cake. Other than having to deal with the occasional surprise visit. At first, my supplies came from Ralph's hidden caches, and I'd say there's still enough guns and dehydrated food over there to equip a small army. He was, at the time, what they called a prepper, one of those people everybody laughed at because they thought the world was about to go to shit. Well, as you can see, old drunken Ralph was right, and I had been wrong. Sure, I let him talk me into joining the militia towards the start of things, but that was mainly to learn how to shoot. I wanted to protect the neighborhood from vagrants and looters, the undesirables. The city rats never made it out this far as I saw. For whatever reason, I really thought things would be okay. I believed them when they said that order would be restored. I mean, why wouldn't I? I was still programmed to. Of course, that was back before things got really weird, before the beasts came sliding through the cracks of our collective sanity. By that point, it was too late to get supplies, unless, of course, you wanted to kill for them. I hadn't quite reached that stage yet, but I soon learned the shouting voice of desperation can always make a strong case for murder. Not that the shouting is always needed. But I'll get to the point, and sorry for getting so philosophical. Even under that hood you're looking bored. Look at me, though, using a captive as a confessor. Jesus Christ, maybe I am going crazy. Nah, I'm sure it's just stress. Anyway, here's what I'm getting at. Well, I killed Ralph, and I still think about it. I get a lot of time to think. Sometimes I wonder if I'm stuck in limbo. It's not that he's the only person I've killed. Sorry, forgot you know that already. That was insensitive of me. But I think why killing Ralph weighs so heavily on my mind is because he was the first. I think that's the point where I fully embraced the beast that is man, especially when I saw how easy it was. It's sort of this divine gag that the strength of man is surpassed only by his frailty. Have you ever thought about that? I have. Thankfully, we've devised machines to easily snuff that spark of promise, because sometimes the simplest tool is best. Something like a knife or a hatchet or a hammer or a pickaxe. I've seen men get riddled with 5.56 and still be crawling, but one good whack with a hatchet, well, do that and most people never move again. That's right, the blade is more humane than the gun. Who would have thought? Damn, these beans are good. Shame they're French style. Goddamn French beans. JK ladies, I love French beans. Now, where was I? People? Question mark? That's right, people. We are crafty though, people I mean, aren't we? And look where it's got us. Take for example this, my liberated wind-up radio, part of the spoils from Ralph's. I turn it into a cassette player, see? I use this to listen to his Limbaugh library. It's quite the collection. Now that I think about it, Ralph and Rush had a lot in common. Different habits maybe, but both were about the same size, and Ralph was just as loud. Anyway, when I did it, when I killed him, in that moment I was born anew. I became defender of this place. At last I was a warrior in more than name. Ralph had insulted my home by repeatedly slandering its value, and for that, he had to die. He had just walked around the side to pee, and I silently crept up behind. I can still picture him standing there, that dark golden flow of his urine spraying forth, a sure sign of significant dehydration. Regardless of the details, I decided to make it quick for him, and took my pickaxe to the back of his head. I swung with such rage, my repressed fury from days of degradation coming to a point which then came through the front of his forehead. A mighty feat indeed. His body fell forward, and my fingers were wrapped so tightly around the handle that I nearly fell with him. The plop he made was fitting, the fact he was twitching in his own piss suitable. Scratch one foe, the first of many. After the fall of Ralph in the second week of the new age, things moved slowly. I moved slowly. I learned to hunt, to scavenge, and, when necessary, to kill. Those first few days alone were hard. It was a lot more dangerous to move around then. Most of the really nasty ones hadn't devoured each other yet. Those nights were scary, but I'm sure you understand what it is to be afraid of the dark. It surrounds us and will never go away. But after I'd endured months of isolation, fear, and loneliness, I was able to go out at night and acquire all sorts of stuff. Good, useful stuff. Thanks to my neighbors, I soon had everything I needed to survive in comfort, virtually indefinitely. In fact, it's this comfort that has become my gimmick, one I've used to my advantage to waylay many, many travelers. My comfort is maintained and many a vagabond slain, so thus my honor is sustained. Sorry if that's not a practice, because it is. It's from a song I'm working on. But imagine, if you were traveling along a dusty road, fighting off hateful creatures throughout the night and hungry humans throughout the day, then in the distance you see this, my well-tended green oasis. Would you not hasten towards it like a child towards a candy house in the forest? Many have. Even though I could tell in their eyes as I buried my hatchet or fired my bullet that they were aware of its oddity, they just didn't care any longer. They were tired of the world as it is now, of their earthly toil. So, for this, I put them down. No, I released them. But their death had purpose, yes. Each death, and there were many, sustained my comfort, my luxury, my domicile, and with it, my ruse. Now, here I am, the top of the food chain, and, between us, It's all right. I'm quite confident few eat as well as I do. After telling you this, I'm sure you think I'm an animal, but please, don't get me wrong. I don't enjoy the killing. It's something I do only for survival's sake. Sometimes I even miss people, but I guess that's sort of obvious. I could have killed you outside, but for some reason I felt like talking. It has been a while since I've had company. I know, though, that you cannot have order with others, regardless of how I sometimes feel. Unfortunately, I know from experience that logically, there's no real safety to be had within a group. Each individual person has two hands, each capable of putting a pickaxe in your head. Before the end, we had tried for thousands of years to get along and had always failed, due to our wars, our corruption, our petty stupidity. I've always wondered, if we hate each other so much, why do we always seek to clump together, I've spent never-ending months in contemplation until at last I discovered the answer. Imagine my amazement when I realized it was simple vanity. The vanity of man, something individually constructed. It's another form of machine, one that has stepped a relentless march across the face of the earth until it ground itself to a halt with a tired shriek of rusted gears. Hey, that was pretty good. Maybe I should start writing this down. Could be useful someday. Don't be so stiff. Remember, I'm allowed to talk as long as I'd like. There's no one around to shush me. I'm the king of this castle, a model libertarian. That's what I am, in case it's not obvious, a libertarian. Old school. I view it as an important part of my character. A lot of people don't like labels, but I don't mind them, as long as they're accurate. Libertarianism, though? Well, at first I thought it was all about assholes wanting the right to be selfish. I thought they all wanted to stockpile supplies for personal benefit and shun their fellow man. Now I know, though. I understand. When things fall apart, that shit works. Imagine how those know-it-all liberals look now, knowing those guys on Fox were right. Guns, supplies, Jesus. Out here, I've needed all of them. Literally. How many men can say that? Though ignorant in many respects, inside of his home, Ralph had kept what I now call the library, a vast treasure trove of valuable literature. Some was obscure, much of it no more than rants, but after reading and listening to it, everything began to make a whole lot of sense. Eventually, I could piece together the truths that, when combined, created a crystal clear picture. I now know, for a fact, that it started when they burned down the towers. Then, when they'd finished, there were no towers left. Whew. Sorry about that. Things got a little serious for a minute. But that's what I do. I spend my time here, waiting, watching, mowing, reading Tolkien, listening to Limbaugh, and chain-smoking dry Winstons. That's my story, the quick version anyway, and I thank you for being my audience, captive though you may be. I'm sorry you've had to listen to my tale with that bag over your head, but I get nervous when people look at me, especially when their eyes are wide with fright. I'd like to say I'm not going to hurt you, but as I'm sure you've guessed, that would be a lie. I promise to do my best to keep the pain to a minimum, but now, your part in the story is over, my dear. Your weary travels across the shattered earth are at an end. In a way, I envy you. Trust me, I've thought of ending my own life many, many times. I would sit on the floor in silence and taste the thin sheen of gun oil that coats the barrel of my Glock. I would slowly squeeze the trigger and edge ever closer, closer towards the Big Bang. But every time, right before I pulled the trigger, I found myself wondering, who will tend the yard? It's got to be me, you see. It's got to be me. None that remain have sufficient attention to detail. Oh, did you hear that? They're still out there. Still right outside. They're hungry, and they won't leave this place until they are full. I'm sorry, but one body blown to shreds won't be enough to feed them. All that did was whet their appetite. They'll need two, I'm sure you understand. But that's enough ceremony, enough conversation. It is now time for this to end. My, you are lovely, though. What a waste. Hello, bright eyes. Don't look so sad. It'll be quick, I promise. I've done this personally 263 times. Tell you what, I'm feeling generous tonight, so I'll let you choose. Isn't that nice of me? Which one will it be, my darling? What do you prefer? My paper? or my plastic? You seem undecided, but it is a tough one. Very well. I'll let you think about it. There's no rush down here.